Hello, everybody. This is Ash for the Triple S League. I'm here with Moontag and Subsidian, as always, and we are here to discuss something very interesting that's going on in the gaming industry right now, a debate, and it all surrounds Baldur's Gate 3, and there's some interesting discussion going on that we're going to dive into because there's a lot of opinions flying around about this on a lot of different perspectives about it, but Baldur's Gate 3 has certainly made some waves recently. First of all, it did the unthinkable. It moved its release date earlier, at least for PC. I believe it. Didn't you say on consoles it's staying the same, Saib? But
PC it's coming out in basically 2 weeks, and on the PlayStation it's going to be coming out about the same time as Starfield, actually. So that's
yeah. But so it was originally supposed to supposed to come out in September. Or end of August.
The Xbox is still not there because the Xbox is being very stupid because they want all of the games that are releasing. If you're releasing a game on the main console, they want it to run on the lighter version of the console at the same time.
The Series S as well as the Series X. So they have that requirement.
It's just mental when you think about it. It's like who on earth would.
That's just kind of a rabbit trail, but I can see from a business perspective why they would do that. So it's not like, oh, you have to buy the new console or you can only play some of the games, or you have to buy the upgraded console in order to gain access to more games. Like that, that's a bad look.
Still, it is a lot to manage to try to make it all come out at the same time. So I don't know. To me, it makes sense to stagger it.
Sure. So in any case, they moved at least the release date for PC for Baldur's Gate 3 moved earlier, which is just unheard of. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. Maybe it has, but it would be before my time in working in this industry. But anyway, moving to more current news, we have some game devs weighing in on now that people have access to Baldur's Gate 3, like the full version of Baldur's Gate 3. The full version is close to release. People are gaining access to it. They're seeing more and more about it. Some people have had the ability to play it, and people are seeing how polished, how massive, and how high of quality that this game is. We have some debate going on about whether or not this should be a new standard for RPGs going forward. And we have a lot of game devs weighing in saying, no, it shouldn't. And we're gonna talk about that and what's actually going on there. But this was sparked by a Twitter thread that's been reported on in this article by a Game World Observer, which Moon has up on the screen right now. So the Twitter thread was from Zalavir Nelson Jr. I'm probably saying his name wrong. I apologize.
I have no idea how to say it.
Might be Zalavir. Nelson Jr. He's the head of Strange Scaffold, which is a developer I've honestly never heard of. Known for Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, whatever that is.
He himself has worked on a large number of titles in the past, and he's not a nobody in the industry. He's got some clout, and he is working on the new Stranger Things. I believe it's a VR game. So that's what his studio is working on.
Yes, so he's the head of Strange Scaffold, but also, his Twitter bio says writing for Stranger Things VR, Hypnospace Outlaw, and more. So in any case, so he's written this Twitter thread that made waves, and basically arguing that Baldur's Gate 3 should not be setting a new standard for RPGs in the gaming market because it's kind of an anomaly. That it's the circumstances around its development are unique, and he cites a few things. A long development cycle that started back in 2017. 2 previous games, Divinity Original Sin and Divinity Original Sin 2. And the tech and institutional knowledge that they were able to draw from, that Larian Studios, the developer of Baldur's Gate 3, was able to draw from, having previously developed Divinity, both of those Divinity games. He also cites the successful early access period, lasting 3 years, that provided Larian with community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow. He cites the fact that they have a huge team of over 400 developers across 7 offices. I had no idea they were actually that big. I didn't know Larian was that big of a developer. And also
they didn't start out that way. They've been hiring and growing and doing all. They're doing literally everything they can possibly do to make this game work.
Yeah. He also cites the fact that they have the license for one of the largest entertainment IPs, Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't know what that last one specifically has to do with
immense amount of damage over the last year.
It definitely has, and I also don't see how that really applies to the quality of this RPG specifically. It is the world it is set in, but as far as but that's one of the things he cites. But then he goes on to say that this is not a new baseline for RPGs, it's an anomaly. Trying to do the same thing in the same way, especially without the same advantages, could kill an entire group of studios. So he's, I guess, kind of arguing that if other developers try this, they're in for disaster. And he also says, you can't separate a game from the process used to build it. So those are some of the arguments made on this his perspective that this should not be a new baseline for the industry. But there's other developers that have been weighing in on this, some from smaller studios, some from larger studios. And we should really get into and talk about this, because I think it is, like it or not, I think this is going to set a new standard. That's just what happens. That's my opinion. This is just what happens.
True. You see a similar thing when you see a game become successful, and then you see a whole bunch of other studios kind of piggyback off of that, being like, "Oh, that thing is really, really in right now. Let's do that too."
Right, and that can happen with a fad, but or just a new innovative idea. When Fortnite with what they did with becoming the massive 100-person shooter. But then,
which was not, by the way, any decision made by any of the leadership. The leadership that were in control and able to make the calls were basically, well, this is just a wasted product at this point. We might as well just give up on this. There's no way that this is going to work. And it was a bunch of mid-tier guys who were like, hey, let's try this. Yeah. And they threw together basically a PUBG type game, and it took off because it was really smooth and colorful, and it was something that people liked to look at, and it's still very well done.
But then after that, for a long time, everyone was trying to be the next Fortnite. Yeah. But I think we're talking about something slightly different here. I think we're talking about a standard of quality and polish,
well, it's not just the polish,
not just the polish, but also in the vastness of the storytelling and all the different scenarios it accounts for. And you were saying something like there's 17,000 different ending combinations.
Yeah, so there's not combinations. There's 17,000 different endings. There's endings for particular characters, there's endings for particular places, times, locations, stuff like that get affected by what the player does. Per run, you may not encounter even a large percentage of that, because you may not necessarily have, encountered and dealt with every particular thing in the world. Did you save so-and-so who was a minor character? How did that work out? Did that change anything on the larger scale of the moving pieces on the chessboard, so to speak? So that's what they're talking about when they're talking about the endings. It's not that there's 17,000 different endings with all of the as a singular, you're counting everything that happens at the end of the game as a single ending. It's that's not quite how that goes, but it is still really broad and really big. And this is so funny because I remember when, Dragon Age Origins came out, everybody said the same thing. It was like, oh, this is too big. This has redefined the cinematic RPG. There's nobody that'll catch up to this. And then what did BioWare do on the next game? They walked away from all the progress that they were making towards making basically what Baldur's Gate 3 is. They had just a few races and just a few classes, and now there's so much more in this. But if you backtrack a little bit, they had even more options. They had this exact game with Neverwinter Nights 1 and Neverwinter Nights 2, and they were so disinclined to work on Neverwinter Nights 2 that they just actually handed it off to Obsidian and said, you make this because we don't want to. And then there were, then they made the Mass Effect series, and again they walked away from they sort of walked away with where they were going with that, because they made the trilogy and then they were like, well, that's it, we're not doing this again, until public pressure mounted to the point where they're like, all right, well, we'll set up a new studio and try and get this new studio to do it with a new engine that doesn't actually work and all this other stuff. And it just kind of like, Andromeda kind of hit the wall, and they sacrificed that for the sake of making Anthem, which is, I mean, what a joke that was at this point. But it's this idea that what he's saying in this this Twitter thread is that there's no way anybody can do this, because that's just not how you make games. The way that Larian made this game was just insane and stupid, and nobody in their right mind would ever even attempt to do this again, despite the fact that, it's kind of obvious that this is what more studios should be doing, in the sense of not making this exact type of game, but just spending time trying to improve the games that they're making. Why did BioWare go from making a cinematic RPG to making another cinematic RPG that wasn't in the same universe? They started with Jade Empire, then they tried to do Dragon Age Origins. I think I've got that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got that in the right order. And then they did the Mass Effect game, and they did all this other stuff. And it's just like, at what point should you guys just stay on target? And I would say that this isn't the same when you're looking at Bethesda, because all Bethesda games are very similar. It's just different thematic overlays, basically. But it's the same type of game.
That is one thing Bethesda has done well, is they've narrowed their focus, and they make a particular type of game, and that's the type of game that people expect from them. For all of their flaws, that's one thing Bethesda has been consistent on. But speaking of Obsidian, we had one of the larger developers that's responded to
Nelson
Jr.'s thread
was a good take.
Yeah, we had Josh Sawyer, who is a director over at Obsidian currently, worked on Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, Fallout New Vegas, Icewind Dale 1 and 2, etc. Had this take in response to Xavier Nelson Jr.'s thread. Josh said, "Great thread. The conditions under which Baldur's Gate 3 was made are atypical. This is in no way a slight against the game or the people working on it, who are clearly passionate and talented. Having the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own terms is invaluable." Okay.
Now that was a good take, in the sense of him, giving them a congratulations and pointing out the importance of having control over your own destiny, essentially. And that I'm sure him and several other people regret selling themselves out to Microsoft, in the sense that, it's just maybe not going to be the best thing for them in the long term. And that might be agreeable, but they were never in the position to, they never got success with their other projects enough to be that individual company. And, part of that is obviously boils down to luck. And I do think that out of all the studios in the world, Obsidian got the worst luck. They have the worst luck, period. The absolute worst luck. They just constantly couldn't get a break. So, but the take that I'm disagree with is agreeing with this tweet in general, because it's not really how you're not really looking at it in the right lens. They're not looking at it in the right lens, because what they're saying and what they're seeing is that, oh, nobody can try the same thing again because it's so lucky that they got in this one particular position at this one particular time and the stars aligned for this. And it's like, well, no, because let's go through a quick history. Larian Studios has almost gone bankrupt twice. They had to they did crowdfunding to fund their last 2 games, and Sev went on record saying that if they couldn't secure the funding, he was about to mortgage his house and live in the studio because he was so desperate to make this work. And I want to point out that all of the leadership of BioWare and the leadership of EA and the leadership of Blizzard, nobody has that level of confidence or work ethic or commitment to their own job, to the company that they run. None of those people in any of these big companies, in any of these big companies, is willing to put everything on the line to make something work that they know will work because they've had previous experience with it. We're not talking about somebody going down to the casino and putting everything on 42. Is odds black or is it evens black?
No idea.
No, I don't know. I've never played.
But putting everything down on 42 black, let's say, I'm going to assume that. For example, and they're going to put everything down on that one thing. They're going to take their house mortgage and everything, and then they're going to roll the roulette wheel. Nobody's that stupid. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that are that stupid.
Some people are, yes.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Sev. Like Sven. At this point,
his name is Sven. I don't know why you keep calling him Sev.
Because I'm dyslexic, so the E and the V keep on rotating in my head.
If Saib ever says Sev, he's talking about Sven.
Sven, yes.
Yeah, the leader of over at Larian Studios there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The guy who dresses in the armor, he is probably one of the most amazing bosses that I think that
I've seen in the industry, yeah.
Yeah. He seems like a fun guy at the same time he seems like he's a boss who would have high expectations and is very disciplined. But
yeah, he's
whatever's going on over there, he's being successful, whatever he's doing.
Yeah. He's sacrificing. I have a little bird who told me that he hasn't taken out a major payment for his time and effort from the company for years, because he has put in every cent that he possibly can into making this work. I don't know if that's true. Right now, you kind of take it as a grain of salt, but we heard him say this when they were working on DOS 2, is that he was willing to, mortgage his house, put every cent he had into paying his employees' wages so that they could have they could eat and pay their bills, because he was desperate to make this thing work. And again, that's this level of sacrifice that apparently is completely lost on a lot of these people.
Well, yeah, we were talking earlier, like, could you possibly see some of the CEOs of these gigantic publishers doing that? No. Nope. Nintendo has some, there's some times in Nintendo's history where some of the upper people took pay cuts so that they could avoid laying off staff. And for all of their flaws, that's one of the things I respect about Nintendo. But aside from that, I highly doubt some of these CEOs would give up their fifth yacht in order to, keep on game devs who are passionate about making good games, because, I mean, how many of these people really care about games anyway? A lot of the times you get people in who are just care about the business side of things, and really the artistry and the quality of the game itself, it doesn't seem to matter to them, and that's why we get atrocities like almost everything coming out of EA and Activision and everything these days. So I'd like to read this response to Josh Sawyer's tweet, or this response to Josh Sawyer's response to the initial Twitter thread we were talking about. This is from a small account, but I think it sums things up really well. At Maddie the Rogue. I won't read the whole thing, but basically, this quote is really good. These advantages he speaks of are the success of Larian. They didn't just find these advantages in the sandbox; they earned them. And so that's why this is what I really want to zero in on, because it's we shouldn't be talking about this like the stars magically aligned. No, Larian created the circumstances for their own success here. They didn't just luck into it. And so when I kind of hear those overtones of like, oh, it's an anomaly, oh, it was well, yes, it is an anomaly. You don't see a lot of studios doing this.
But to disregard it as just luck is like very shallow way of looking at it.
Yeah, and they're stopping short of saying, oh, it was just lucky. But you kind of get that it at least has those undertones of like, oh, they were just in the right position to do this, and most studios might not be. Well, that may be true, and it's not to say that Xavier Nelson Jr. and Josh Sawyer don't have a point here. I think they do have a point, but maybe studios need to be run differently. Maybe they should be given the opportunity if they're owned by a larger publisher, or maybe they should be, just run in such a way that they do have these kinds of opportunities for success like this. And this could become the new standard for quality of games, not just in the RPG genre, but in any genre of game. And by the way, I don't think anyone's going to hold small indie studios to this standard. Like, Larian's an indie studio. They're a large indie studio. But, if you got a small 10-person team making an RPG, like, I think anyone who's got two brain cells to rub together is not going to hold those people to the same standard, right?
Yeah.
But if we're talking about, I think especially if we're talking about giant, like, games that have massive budgets behind them, much larger budgets than what Larian put toward Baldur's Gate 3, and much more people working on them, well, what's their excuse? Why aren't they creating something at this level or better? That's my take. So anyway, I'll let you guys.
And I think some of the core problems of why haven't we seen a game like this? The easiest answer to that is because one is the engine argument. We heard this so much with Bethesda. Their engine's broken. It's bad. It's not good. They need to change over to Unreal. Look at Unreal. Unreal's engine is amazing. In Unreal, you can do this and that and this and that. And meanwhile, Todd is like, yeah, but I want to go to space and fly around on, I want to have a solar system.
I want to have a cave where I can put all my sandwiches.
And I want to do that. And it's like, you can't do that in Unreal. It would take years, probably a decade of tweaking that engine to make it be the exact same thing as that. And then it's not even their engine. It's not like the support could be pulled at any time. And it's like, oh, and then
it is funny here because they're complimenting Larian here for the same thing that Bethesda has been criticized for, which is
because they criticized Larian for this too. People don't remember that when the game first came out and they first showed the first snippets of Baldur's Gate 3, it looked a lot like DOS 2. It looked a lot like DOS 2.
Divinity Original Sin 2. In case anyone's confused and thinking we're talking about the operating system from the 80s and 90s, no. DOS 2 is Divinity Original Sin 2. They're Larian's previous games.
Yeah, they were journalists who were mocking the idea of this game being in the old engine, saying they really should have switched to Unreal. Why didn't they switch to Unreal? This is so stupid. Why are they doing the same thing in the same engine and it's just not as good as it could be? Blah, 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 blah. that was a common, very negative review that I saw in a lot of places. There were a lot of people who had issues with that for some reason, and they were very much like, "Oh, hey, yeah, this, Larian's making a mistake here, working with this old, outdated engine that can't handle what it needs to handle in order for it to be good." And you just kind of like slap your face and you roll your eyes and you go, "What now?" You do that because it's like, because they're saying, what are they saying now? It's like, oh, they're so lucky. They have this really good engine that
they had this engine that was perfect for this game.
That was perfect for this game.
It's like they made perfect for the game. Like, they created it. So
surprise when you specialize.
Did Larian create the original engine, or is it?
It's their
in-house engine. Okay, so they and so they fine-tuned it for exactly the type of game that they want to make, and of course that's going to be a massive advantage to them, to use the word that that some of these commentators are making on this. Yes, it's an advantage, but it's an advantage that they created. They made their own opportunity there. They made their own advantage, and I think that's the key. I think this is what we need to focus on. It's like, you don't have all these advantages. EA, your studios that you pump hundreds of millions of dollars into don't have these same advantages. Why not? That doesn't make any sense. Is it possibly because you forced them all to use Frostbite for games that had no business being made in Frostbite? Maybe. Just a thought, not
just maybe, an obvious yes. Like
that, I mean, there's a company whose studios should switch to Unreal.
Yeah,
and in some cases already they have, and it's gone well. But yeah, so why do your studios then not have these advantages? We're not talking about the small indie studios that are a few people working on a passion project. We're talking
about an advantage. Sven had, 10 years ago, he didn't have $1 billion to throw at a random project. You know who has that kind of money? I don't even know if even today he has that kind of money. I kind of doubt it. But you know who has that money right now? EA, Tencent, Blizzard. They had that a decade ago, 2 decades ago almost. They had that money just sitting there. And again, and like, you look at some of their newer games that these studios have put out, and the same people who are going, well, that's really, that they've gotten kind of lucky, and that's they had all these advantages. And when I hear somebody complaining about advantages, what I hear them saying is unfair advantages, because they don't have what somebody else has who's built that thing. Because again, the whole engine argument debate for a long time has been people like me saying, they really need to you really need to tailor custom your engine for what you need. And I don't think the whole Cyberpunk thing was people reacted very poorly with that. And then of course they ended up cheering when they announced, oh, we're moving to Unreal. It's like, the engine wasn't the problem with that game. The problem was you released it 2 years too soon. Because the game now is quite good, and you also changed direction.
Well, and there were, I was going to say, the reason why it needed another, the reason it needed another 2 years is because of the reboots and how they changed directions mid-course and
several
all of this.
times.
That's management and design problems. That's it wasn't engine problems with Cyberpunk at all.
I don't know why anybody would the whole at first it's when they came out and said, we redesign the wheel every time because that's important to us. It's like, well, actually, you probably didn't want to do that here. I mean, I'm just saying, you probably really didn't want to do that here, because it made very little sense for what you got out of the scenario. So that's a little problematic.
Yeah. Well, So yeah, when we get into a situation like this where we have an unprecedented kind of situation like this, and we have other companies looking at it and saying nobody does it that way. Don't you dare start expecting us to do it that way, because we're not gonna do it that way. So there. Keep your expectations low. In other words, I don't know. Maybe those are the companies that are going to be left behind, and maybe it's the ones that do start doing it the new way that are going to succeed. Moon, you had something you wanted to say about this, just based on your experience working.
There is something to be said for if something works. Don't fix what's broken. But in this case, we have a clear example of somebody or a company that has streamlined a sort of process that's been in the works over quite a long time that clearly has shown fruits of success now, right? Because even you take, for example, in my previous work, I've been with companies where they're using a program that, sure, it's catered to the output that they want, but it's not the most optimized. And there's other companies who also have similar goals and similar programs, but are also not optimized. And they have the workers being oh, well, you want us to output this, but if we tried things slightly differently, or maybe made a specialized program geared towards what we want, maybe that could work. And they're told, no, do it my way or the highway. This is how we've always done it, and don't you dare change it. It's but we could make things really efficient, and and we can do so much better than what we're doing right now. Wouldn't that make sense? And they're like, no, because I am the boss, and I say these things, and you follow my lead. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but I think more companies should look towards Larian as an example of what they could be, honestly, instead of being oh, look at them, they're sticking out too much.
Yeah, they're too good at what they do. Don't expect that.
How dare they? How dare they make us look bad? It's
they're making us look bad. It's this, and again, it kind of. I find it kind of funny that they're pointing all these things out as advantages, or as if Larian's privileged somehow. No, right? They work their asses off to get to have what the advantages that they have.
I almost wonder is these some of these devs that are making these comments is are they newer devs in the scene? Because honestly, I don't follow devs specifically. I look at the product, really.
Yeah. No, the folks commenting on this on Twitter are
long time?
Or Zalavier Nelson Jr. is, and again, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. No disrespect.
I have no idea how to say that name. I'm not even going to
try. Yeah, it's Xalavier. I don't know how to pronounce it. But anyway, Mr. Nelson Jr. Has been around for a while, worked on a bunch of things, and then especially
veteran.
Some of the and then a lot of people replying and saying, yes, this is a good thread. Like Josh Sawyer has been around; he's been in the industry forever.
Okay, well, in that case, I feel like these people making these comments should know better than, if they've been in the industry for so long and they've been through some things, But then again, that's a whole my way or the highway. This is the way we've always done it kind of mentality. Maybe that's what's coming across, at least from my impression.
I think.
Yeah. Well. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I think that it's people. We've seen this happen before. We saw it happen in the 80s. We saw it happen with 3D technology. Mm-hmm. The video game industry has crashed several times because they couldn't evolve fast enough. You had companies that were really good at making 2D games, and instead of looking at 3D games going, you know what? These 3D games offer this three-dimensional world to play in, but is that something that we can do? Is that something that we have to do? Can we not find better ways to make 2D games? Because that's what we all know. And that's the experience that we all have. So perhaps if we got together and decided, hey, we're not going to just bow to the idea of this insane, concept of like, we're just going to drop everything that we're working on. So many projects were like in their final phases of completion when 3D tech came out. And the companies, instead of finishing them, putting them out and selling them, they said, all right, guys, we're changing everything. And they took skill sets that people, that they put their faith in skill sets that their current lineup of staff didn't have. And so they then tried to retrain them in technology that they weren't familiar with and couldn't do, and said, yes, we're changing the we're going to change this, and we're going to go in this direction, and this is going to, and it's like, guys, what kind of mental gymnastics, what kind of like, what are you smoking that you think that this is a good idea? And we have the same thing here where these studios are all sitting around going, you know what, we all need to just stick with these the flash in the pan genres, ideas, and stuff, and we just need to focus on other things. I put out a Twitter post when we posted the Maximum News episode. Please go watch the Maximum News episode. They're on our second channel, Triple S Podcasts. Max and I have been doing that for a while now, and they're really good, but we need more people to listen into them. But I put out a post. It's like, and it's a Twitter post, so it's not very long. But the concept is like, where is the ideas that are driving innovation in these big companies? Where are the ideas that are supposed to be making these games better? Where is the active, intelligent, like, hey, let's build something new that people haven't seen before with the skills that we're good at? Where is that in comparison, in these big major companies, not these small indie guys, but in the big major companies? Where is that thinking? Because the small indie companies, they're doing this all the time. There's all kinds of new stuff that's being created, and lots of smaller creators are making amazing, amazing, amazing games, and in genres that you and I are not familiar with, right? So it's like, it's really cool.
It's unfortunate that because there are some incredible indie games that nobody ever hears of just because you just don't hear about them. But what we have here, and I really want to emphasize this, is instead of spending millions of dollars to make this kind of like tech to do this kind of thing, and I'm going to go back to Blizzard here, because Blizzard, instead of like, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out how to make optimized microtransaction systems and how to engage players with, like, right now, World of Warcraft, got a couple of friends who still play it, and they're saying they're working on this system that keeps you like playing every month, because it's like you don't want to miss anything. It's fear of missing out. And they just put out this big new dungeon, and it has like 10 minutes of story in it, and it's great. And I'm like, 10 minutes of story? You mean a multi-billion-dollar company can't make more than 10 minutes of story every 6 to 9 months? You're telling me that a small studio like Larian can pump out 176 hours of cinematic in-game story content that is directed and acted out by actors in suits, mocap suits, and facial capture, and you can't spend a few $1 million to add an hour of content every 6 months to one of the biggest games in the world? You can't do that. You're incapable of. Oh yeah, that's just impossible, man. Like, do you know how many voice actors we would have to hire? Oh, gee, please tell me how many voice actors were in the 10 minutes of content that they just put out. Well, there was like the bad guy, and then the other bad guy, and then there was the two main good guys that were really present in this one, and then there was another guy that said some stuff. So it's like 5 people. You got 5 people to do, like, again, you give me just $1 billion, and I will add a whole season of content to World of Warcraft or to
Hearthstone or whatever game that Blizzard wants it to be added to. You know, people talk about how they're playing through Diablo 4 again, you know, because they finished the first run and now they're going through the second world and the next world. And it's like, it's all, yeah, they just skip all the voice dialogue because it's all the same stuff. And again, it's like, I'm pretty sure that with $1 billion, I could have designed that so that you don't hear the same story like twice unless you play it for like 5 years. Like $1 billion is a lot of money for creative process. Well, you know.
Yeah, but how many yachts are you going to buy, Seth?
Exactly. You stole my line. I'm like, but Bobby needs his yachts. You don't understand. The yachts need to be, they need to be created. They need to be bought up. Otherwise, who's going to buy the yachts? So that's the stupidity. That and tech that's not specialized, right? And I really want to emphasize that because, you know, both, I said it before, Bethesda and Larian are both using, you know, air quotes, old engines that previously have been mocked for being old. Yet turns out it's exactly what they needed. And maybe more of these companies should have been thinking along those lines and using their head before, like, you know, standing around with their hands in their pockets going, well, it's really, you don't understand. It's really impossible to make like high level content. You just can't do that. You know, you just can't do that with these, you know, with the new engines because we don't know how to use them. And it's like, then maybe make something that's specialized exactly for the job that you need. I can't tell you how many times Mooney and I have actually created a tool for the job that we're doing that cuts down the work that we're doing by like 50%. It's like,
oh yeah, yeah, I do that. I do that too all the time.
Mm-hmm, right?
In web design,
it's like efficiency, optimization.
But you hear the nightmare stories where it's like the Frostbite engine didn't even have the tools to create RPG content. And they shoved it in their face and use this. And then they wondered, gee, man, how does Larian get away with this? I can't believe that they get so lucky. And it's like, oh my God, you people are like
yeah. And to bring it back around, like I can understand why, you know, sort of a mid-sized studio might look at this and be like, well, I hope people don't start expecting that of us, you know, if we're making an RPG. If they don't have Larian's budget and size, okay, you know, I think that's kind of a reasonable concern, but I don't know, it's trying to run damage control beforehand, I think is a bad look. And especially when you start, you know, when you look at studios like Obsidian or anything kind of larger than that, and I'm not sure if anyone from the really large studios has weighed in on this or not, but I don't see why, especially with Microsoft's resources behind them, why Obsidian couldn't try to copy what Larian's done right. Like, okay, you know, I get it. You know, this hasn't been done before, but look at it and say, okay, what can we learn from this? Instead of being like, don't expect this from us in the future, look at it and be like, okay, let's emulate success.
Or try to find your own way to success. And again, I'm not saying this one guy is saying the indie developers, right? Like the 40-man studios. It's like,
of course, it's ridiculous to expect that.
I roll my eyes a little bit at that, just a little bit, because it's like, do you know what 40 people could do if 20 of them know how to use AI smartly?
Yeah, like you take the rock, paper, scissors AI movie thing.
Like, I mean, it's like you can create a lot of stuff, and more so every single day, by doing things that most people would consider impossible, but you could do them with AI right now. And again, there's some questions about the efficacy of, you know, what can or cannot be used. But all I'll say to that is, you know, we've heard this argument 1,000 times before. The last time that it happened to such a great degree was I won't use that one because that'll get us banned. But I'll use the other one, which is the transition from horses to cars. It's like, think of all the industry jobs that were lost by doing that. Then think of all the new ones that were created. Think of all the power that gave individuals. Think of all the good things that came out of that. And yeah, sure, a little bit more emissions came out of it too. But on the grand scheme of things, vehicles actually isn't that big. It's not nearly.
Let's not. You always get in trouble. You always get us in trouble when you mention anything about that. But anyway, over. One of the points made about Larian was over 400 developers in 7 different offices. And I would like to point to another game that I've talked about many times that was made by an indie studio that pulled off something absolutely incredible. Kingdom Come Deliverance. That game is amazing for the size of the studio that created it. And that was created by Warhorse Studios, which currently, as of last year, has just over 200 employees. And I don't know, and I'm presumably they had less than that when they were making Kingdom Come Deliverance. So I think you're absolutely right, Saib. I mean, small studios can do incredible things when they create their own circumstances for success. And, I mean, is there some luck? Well, maybe, but I think that,
but at the same time,
degree, everything relies a little bit on luck.
Yeah, because the thing to kind of take away from this whole situation, I think, is instead of throwing shade at other people because you're scared of them making you look bad, why not just optimize and use what you've got, build up your own skills, make something that you are proud of and that you can be successful at with your own merits, right? You don't have to copy what somebody else is doing, but you can learn from how they did what they did, right?
Yes, exactly. So instead of bitching about it, they should be like, wow, they did some incredible stuff. We should emulate that and be more successful in our future products. Is really, that's an attitude of success,
right?
This saying, oh, they were so fortunate, and this is an anomaly.
And they made these other games that were successful before. It's well, why not look at your own successes and build off of that?
Yeah, I think that's a failure mindset to have. So that's
because it's outsourcing the responsibility rather than taking any on your own.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's our take on all of this. We look forward to hearing yours. Please do put your thoughts in the comments down below. And, of course, slam that like button and subscribe for tons more content like this. Join our Discord server, and we can pick up this discussion there. There's lots of great people to talk to on the Discord server. You can find people to game with. You can find people to talk to.
Check out our memes channel.
The memes are back.
The memes are back.
The memes are back. One of the more popular channels on our server. But thank you so much for listening. And yes, do tell us your thoughts in the comments. And we'll be keeping an eye on this for sure. And there will be some Baldur's Gate 3 content on this channel, obviously. The game we're covering fairly heavily. So
yeah.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.